Welcome to the new series, the sparky new series of FE Voices. The first series that we had earlier this year in May and June featured what the challenges were around racism and the FE sector. What the new series is going to look at is unpicking that and thinking what's the work that's actually going on across our colleges to actually tackle some of the issues to do with building those fairer futures and having a more inclusive workplace and learning environment for all. So we've got 4 colleges, including Milton Keynes College Group. We'll be showcasing the work that they are doing from different angles, different perspectives over the next 4 weeks. Today, as I said, we are going to be showcasing Milton Keynes College Group, and what we have chosen to do is have a strategic approach to building that fairer future. And today we're just going to give you a glimpse on the inside of the work that we're involved in. And I've got Julie Mills, who's our CEO, who's on the screen, and we've got Liz Marr, who's our Link EDI governor, and we've got Lee Mills, and in the video which I'm about to play for you we've got Jason Mansell, who's our senior operations director, as well as Alex Warner, who is one of our principals. And joining us there, I didn't see you there, Lee, we've got Lee, who's our director of marketing and communications. Thank you for joining us. So first of all, welcome to all of you that have joined us today. I know that registration wise this is new for us because normally we do this on Zoom, and today we're doing it on Teams webinar. A whole new thing. Who would have thought it? But we've got registered with us today over 18 different organisations from 11 different locations across England, and these videos will be recorded and made available on our FE Voices pages on our Milton Keynes College website. But what I want to do is jump straight into our presentation because it is slightly longer than we'd normally do, but as it's a launch series and we've got quite a lot of contribution from our senior leadership team, I want to jump straight into that now. Building Fairer Futures sits at the heart of Milton Keynes College Group's new 5-year strategy, which launched earlier on this year in July 2021. However, the work that has led to this point has taken nearly 4 decades. Milton Keynes College Group now consists of 2 sites, one on Chaffron Way in Milton Keynes and the second in Bletchley. We deliver education to 19 different prison locations across England. We also have the Institute of Technology, and we have a commercial arm which includes our graduate salon as well as our brasserie. Today, what I'd like to discuss with you is what Milton Keynes College Group has done, what it's currently doing, and what it plans to do in the future. I started with the group in early 2021, and my name is Arv Kaushal. I'm the Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Manager, and my role goes across the group, and I'm based within People Services. In old money, human resources. The first thing that I noticed walking in through the doors virtually of Milton Keynes College was that the team that I worked within, People Services, was unashamedly, unapologetically people first. That's a huge, high bar to set yourselves, because we know that decisions are made and sometimes there is collateral damage. And weighing that up in terms of, as an organisation, what you are prepared to accept as collateral damage in terms of your people, in terms of your business, is the first key step to making sure that we build that fairer future. And we are working every single day to ensuring that we get that balance right. So how do we do that? There's various models. The model that I've always chosen to follow is that my actions and my behaviours are the thing that stimulate, create and nurture the environment that I set myself within. I have a responsibility as an individual to add to that cultural pot by what I say and what I do. Shook's model says that we're reversing, or we're looking at things in the wrong way. We try and put things in which then try and lead to change in behaviour, which then leads to a cultural change. However, looking at it through the lens of what am I doing and why am I doing it, and starting from that point, is probably the most important and fundamental change that we can have. And that's what we're trying to instill in all of our discussions is that what am I doing and what am I saying? And what impact does that have on the people that report into me, or the learners that I have in front of me, or the way that I engage with my stakeholders, our industry partners. My behaviours and my actions and what I say a lot about who we are as an organisation. You could say that it is everything to do with that. And as soon as that realisation comes in, then that's when the work really starts. Accountability is a strong word. It spreads fear in some people's eyes. From my point of view, I see it as opportunities for me to do the things that I need to do in the way that they need to be done. And I want to be held accountable for that. Because if I say and I believe what I say, and then that aligns with my actions, the accountability is a showcase piece. The accountability is something to be applauded in terms of, this is what I said, this is what I did, and look at the impact. So from my point of view, accountability is absolutely key to driving through any kind of change. To have a look at behaviours that then change the way that you think is absolutely key. And holding people to account in a non-threatening, in a supportive, in a positive fashion is something that you really have to look at how we drive that through. And that's how we are dealing with this whole situation to do with accountability within Milton Keynes College. We're early on in the journey. We are having the discussions, but the good thing is we are having those discussions. And that's the absolutely key point. You could split this up into as many things as you want to, but we've got 4 key strands that we're running through in terms of the work that I do, in terms of to looking at that cultural capital, which is what really sets the tone of our organisation. So our strategic plan, and then some of the intent that comes out of that, is a key driver, but that in itself isn't the thing that will drive the change. As we know, in any organisation, if you're sitting there and you are in a leadership position, you know just because you have it in your plan, it doesn't always mean it happens in the way that you envisage it. You have to have that as the starting point. Then we have to look at the language in terms of what language do people understand. In most organisations, in and out of education, data is evidence. Evidence drives change. Having a focus on what do you capture, how do you capture, and then more importantly, what does it tell you, is a fundamental part of that journey in terms of a positive approach towards accountability and change. And from that, it's the behaviours that you monitor. The behaviours, how do behaviours change when data and evidence is presented to you that aligns with your strategic view, that tells you to do something in a particular way, because that's at the core of what we believe. How do the behaviours develop, and what support as an organisation do you give those decision makers so that those behaviours change in the way that they align with the organisation's core values and their vision? The final part is the impact. We focus so much on impact, but we forget about how do we create that impact. And for me, in my role, that's the most difficult thing, because that's way off. It's a long way down the road in terms of seeing that impact. But the impact must be seen and recognised, because then that needs to feed back into the cycle of what do we do next and how do we do it? How do we continue to go on this journey? And how do we then hold ourselves to account for the things that we say and the things that we want to do? And then ultimately the impact of that process. So what does that actually look like? Because we talk a lot, we talk about our intent, about our wanting to be accountable, our responsibility to create that cultural change. But I think the difficult aspect is that when you're in a position where you can do something about it, what do you actually do? When we have a look at the things that we're focusing on, we've highlighted the things that actually impact the way that we behave. And we've got some key things here. So our strategies I've talked about, and I'll delve into that a little bit deeper. That sets the tone, it sets the direction, it sets the vision that we want to have, where we want to end up, what does good look like as an emotion, as an organisation. But then individually, what are we doing in terms of performance management? Whatever processes that you have, whether they're appraisals, monthly, biannually, however you choose to have them, does this work that you've said is important feature as an accountable factor within a performance management process? If it doesn't, then you've got to think, why would that person do that aspect of that work? Why would they do that if they're not being held accountable, if they haven't seen it as a key responsibility within their day job? And then when we look at
risk. And again, risk, like accountability, people go running. For me, it's the flip side of the coin of opportunity. We have all of these opportunities to do more of the right things and fewer of the things that have a negative impact on the organisation. But unless we identify those and look at the consequence of not doing something, where is the motivation to do that piece of work as an organisation? So currently we're looking at how do we thread this work that to do with that fairer futures throughout our new strategy, throughout the risk register, because that will really identify the key pinch points in terms of where there's a danger that we could go off that path of embedding that fairer future that we want for all of our workforce and our learners. And then, without saying any cliches, put your money where your mouth is. Unless you are prepared to resource and fund that process, there's always going to be a danger that it doesn't happen. Now, in any sector, now especially the education sector and especially the FE sector, budgets are tighter than they've ever been. The need to build capacity is at its greatest point. So at that time, it is easy for an organisation to say, this is something that we'd like to do, but we can't fund this. But the question has to come back. If you feel that it's important, should you be putting money to that? Should you be putting resource to that? Now, not everything costs money, but some things do, and some key things do. Training and development, employing staff, getting expertise in, building our way that we capture information, IT. All of these things cost money, and all of those things are key components in driving that change that you're looking to do. So financing and budget sits at the heart. It's almost like the key holder to what can actually happen meaningfully or not. So in terms of accountability as an organisation, have you set meaningful budgets for this work to be done? And again, this is a work in progress for us as an organisation. We are in that journey. There was no budget before. Now there is a budget, and now we will start looking at whether that budget is effective, and also how can we also initiate the work in different parts of the group and whether that has an impact on the budget. But these are future discussions. And again, I'm going to remind you, we are having these discussions, which in itself is an important factor. The last part of this is that external transparency. What do you choose to share with the outside world? It's okay talking about these really uncomfortable situations and aspects of the work internally within the safety of your boardrooms or the safety of your senior leadership teams. But do your staff know? Do your stakeholders know beyond that? The parents, the guardians? Do the communities that you sit within, do they know? Do your partners know, your stakeholders? Do your supply chain know what you're doing? And how much of that should they know? That in itself brings a level of accountability, because you have to make a clear decision. When you tell somebody the situation, then you have to make a call on whether you act on that or not, if people deem it to be something that needs to change. Now, we've seen over the last 18 months the power of external voice within any organisation. There's been a whole raft of things that have been happening that have really challenged organisations to really think about what their intent is and how they action and how they follow through with those. So that external transparency is another key component. So our strategy, how have we underpinned this work within our strategy? And you'll see through our vision, our purpose is threaded throughout. And essentially, it wouldn't be any different to any other organisation. But the work that we're doing behind the scenes to understand what those words and what those terms mean is actually one of the key drivers. So our shared understanding and the work we're going to do moving forward to make sure that all of our teams understand the words and the meaning behind them and the impact that that has on their day-to-day job and how they can deliver their part of the deal is a key component of driving this work forward in terms of the strategy. And as I said, our vision and our purpose is something that's absolutely key. We've got 6 key strands within there, and I'm not going to delve into the nitty-gritty of each strand, but what we're doing on each strand of those 6 pieces of work is what does equality, diversity, inclusion, and how do we create that sense of belonging within each aspect of our strategy. And our strategic leadership team is doing that work now. This strategy was launched 6 months ago, and it takes time to get to a point where you actually digest what's in there and to form your opinions, to see how it impacts your day-to-day and your future plans within your particular area of the group. And you have to give your business time to understand what you're trying to do before you ask them to go ahead and do that. And that's the process that we're coming towards the end of, that understanding phase. And now the next part is the support phase, which is how do we, once we've identified what we actually need to do and how we need to do it and the implications it has in terms of what we're doing currently and now moving forward, it's what support do we put in place to make sure those things happen in the way that people want them to happen. But I think it's important to note that the 5th element in there, you have to explicitly also say within your strategy what this work is. And that promoting of and living that fairness and that equality and that diversity and inclusion has to be explicitly stated, so that, again, it's raising the profile of that work. It is a key component of our strategy. We cannot be seen as delivering our strategy successfully unless all the elements, as all 6 have been delivered. The 6th point, which was to do with creating that unity piece around the understanding of the strategy as an organisation, again, is a key component of what we do. And how we move forward will be determined by how much we understand the meaning behind our strategy. I suppose at this point you might be asking the question, yeah, this is great, but why do this work? My college is functioning, my organisation is functioning, we're doing okay, our results are okay, everybody seems happy. And it's a good question to ask, especially at a time where you're struggling for finance, struggling for staff and recruitment, and you're thinking, why do this additional work? I think every single organisation and college, institution will make its own decision on that. But for us, it was really important to see, why are we here and what are we trying to solve and what are we trying to grow as an organisation? And Milton Keynes sits within an area, and the facts are on the slide there. I'll let you read through those. But that's one of our key motivators, is that creating that fairer futures has an impact on all of us. And Paul Oxley from St Mark's Church, who I did a session with in the first series, said, where does your community start and where does it end? People don't carry this community baggage on their shoulders as they walk into the college and drop it and go into the college, and then on the way back out they pick it back up again. Our staff come from our communities, our learners come from our communities, our stakeholders, our supply chain, our industry partners come from our communities. So building that fairer future impacts all of us. And when we start looking forward and we're looking at the climate change agenda, and we start looking at the impacts to do with that, and highlighted over the last nearly 2 years with the pandemic, you can see that when we do things right, the benefit that it has for the people that we engage with and our staff and our learners. But when we get things wrong, we can also see the impact of that too. So being blind to what's going on and around you may be a way forward for some, but for us as an organisation, it certainly isn't. It certainly isn't, and that's why one of our key focuses over the next year is to focus on the poverty aspect within our local areas, and really look at our areas, but also look at what we are doing as an organisation, not to add to the pot of poverty wherever we happen to be located. And we have a responsibility to look in as well as looking out, and again, that drives a lot of the motivation to do the things that we want to do. So for us as an organisation, it's really important. We see ourselves as part of the community, as part of the world that we live in. We're not a separate entity. And what we do has an impact on that. And we just got to choose what that impact has got to be. doing nothing has an impact. Doing something has an impact. So there is no net neutral point. Everything you do and what you don't do has an impact. And so from our point of view, that's a really key component. So what's our journey been? How have we got to this point now, and where are we going to be going? I'm just going to focus on the last 2 to 3 years, because I think it's really important to make note of that. 2018, college group, and this is before my time, it was an intentional decision that this work needed to be dealt with in a strategic way. It was no good just having the odd initiative and the odd action. It needed to be a coherent approach towards this work. Otherwise, it's not sustainable. At that point, they decided on a plan on how they would do that. And moving forward to resource, and I said that budget piece, it was a considerable investment on our new HRIS, which is our management system in terms of information management for our workforce. And that was a key component in making sure that we could deliver on that data and then the evidence and then the story behind it. Part of the strategy was to also employ someone like me. And again, that's a considerable investment. And that's an ongoing investment, which again shows the commitment to this work. And I started work at Milton Keynes College Group in January of 2021. And it's important to note that one of the reasons why I chose to work at Milton Keynes College Group was that I knew that the work had started before George Floyd. And I'm going to be quite blunt about that. There were so many opportunities in May, June, July and August of 2020 as a result of what happened across the pond. And the question that I asked myself was this not important before that? Because these situations have been happening before that. Whereas I knew that the Milton Keynes College Group had started this work prior to that. They had seen that it was important and they weren't driven to it by an event or a series of events that happened and that triggered them to think, oh my God, this is important. So for me, that was really important to show the authenticity of their approach. After starting, one of the first commitments we made was to be a signatory to the Race at Work Charter. There's 7 calls to action now. But it was important for me to, again, publicly say that what we are doing and why we are doing it. And one of the key parts of that was publicising the fact that we will be making our ethnicity data and pay gaps as transparent as our gender. And then moving forward, we'll look at other groups of people within the college. And that's important because without looking at that information and then making yourself accountable to that, you've got to question why the work to address the issues would actually happen. Moving forward from that, we've made commitments to publishing that information. Did an internal interim report earlier on this year, and we are now committing to an annual report which will be launched early 2022. The other aspect was, how do we create that safe environment where people can be honest, can have a voice, and employee networks, employee resource groups at a strategic level to feed into that process of decision making is really key to making sure that final part of the jigsaw is not missed. And then to give that the remit to actually look at things like policy, to look at decision making, to feed into that process constructively and positively so that the people within the organisation are more in control of the decisions that are made, and how the college looks is important. It's probably one of the most important things. But the fear is how do you do that in a positive way? How do you do that in a constructive way? And we have just launched 5 employee networks. Again, the mechanism, how they work, feeds into that whole strategic approach that we have. So data and evidence. We've talked about data and evidence in terms of that it's important and is a key part to the accountability and also the why behind the work. We also need to understand that without that evidence, without that data, we cannot speak the same language as the people that make decisions. The moral purpose for this work, the ethical reasons behind why this work is important, have been here for decades, but it hasn't necessarily driven that work or where that change is actually needed at the right time. And that's where, as an organisation, investing not just in the IT aspect, the technical aspect of collecting information, but also then devoting the time and the resource to understanding that is absolutely vital. And just to give you a flavour of the things that we're talking about, so being able to report on what the makeup of the organisation is. So I said we're looking at gender, we're looking at ethnicity as our key strands moving forward, and then we'll build on that. So just to give you an insight in terms of where we're sitting, it's okay. First of all, you need to have robust data. You need to have good. So we have like over 88, 89% disclosure rates. So that means that only 11% of our staff have, for whatever reason, either not shared that information or haven't disclosed it in some way that we can capture it. But having nearly 90% of staff who are doing that, it's robust, which means that it can lead to decision making when those voices come through. But that's not the be all and end all. Knowing and counting is one thing. Understanding what that tells us is actually the most important thing. So being able to drill down and looking at it. So behind the scenes, we have job grades, A being at the lower end and E being at the higher than the executive grade above that. And knowing where our workforce sits, depending on who they are in the organisation, again, is another key component of who we are as an organisation. And you can see by those four graphics there that we don't have an even spread. It's not something that we didn't know, but actually seeing it in blue and white in this occasion really drives that message home. And I've put in the top corner there the gold standard. If we're looking at an even spread across the different job grades, we would expect to see a regular shape, and that's my maths background coming out. It's a regular shape, it's a hexagon, and it comes through. And you can see when we look at the white, that's anybody from a white background. That is almost like the hexagon, but you'll notice that the executive team is 100% white. We know that, and it's something that we need to be honest about, because until you're honest about it, you really can't address the situations that have led to that. And at every point, we need to have honest discussions about what the data and the evidence is telling us. Now, the other aspect of this is that evidence doesn't just come in the form of numbers. So having that whole discussion about what we value as evidence is another key part. And that discussion started earlier on this year. So case studies are important. Employee networks and their voices are important. Anything that comes through, we have Peakon, which is our pulse survey. The information that comes through from there, which is we get an engagement rate, but we also get thousands of comments from people that work within the group, and that's anywhere in the group. And those things are important too, and they are as valued, that's how it should be, as valued as a number that tells you something. So qualitative data and quantitative data, both of those aspects, we have to, as an organisation, start redressing what we value in terms of evidence to drive change. So when we looked at the Shook's model earlier on, where we're looking at changing behaviours, not thinking, you actually have to actively engage in that process. And you can't just tell people to behave in a different way. You have to create opportunities as an organisation so people behave in the way that you want them to, which aligns with your core values. And that's sometimes where the alignment is challenged, I suppose, within some organisations, that the inability to be able to put in place mechanisms that enable people to do more of the things that are positive and conducive to a culture where everybody belongs, whereas asking people to do things when it contradicts the systems is difficult. And I think that's the nub of what we're trying to do, is create as many opportunities as we possibly can so people do more of the right things. We can't just tell people to do the right things. We've got to create that environment for them. And as part of that, that whole safe space, that whole honest approach, that authentic approach is creating platforms where people can use the right language to communicate, whether that's in a written or in a verbal sense. So one of the first things that we did as a group was looked at what language are we okay with, and which language are we not okay with, and which language are we unsure about as an organisation that we need to have a shared understanding about. So one of the things was the Inclusive Language Guide, which we've shared far and wide. And if you want a copy, you can have a copy, you can use it, you can personalise it and make it your own. This is all about nudging good behaviours. This is all about nudging towards the culture that you want and being the enabler in that, leading in that change. The other aspect, as I said, was that creating the employee networks. Now, as I said, we've got 5 networks that have launched. We've got a women's, we've got a men's, we've got a cultural diversity, we've got disability, we've got LGBTQ, and they're all driven by chairs who are passionate about these particular areas. And that's really important, because passion in this work is important, because quite often it's the only reward that you get. And that reward of doing the right thing is sometimes has to be your only reward. And the model that we've put together is, as I'm finding out, fairly unique. Chairs or leads are fairly commonplace. But in terms of making sure that we've put in the right support for the groups, and again, this will grow as we move forward. So obviously we have the membership, which we're growing. But the 2 key components, which really will be the enablers in this process, is one, to appoint an executive sponsor to each network from day one. And each one of our 5 networks has got one of our either executive or senior leadership team who have volunteered, and you'll be hearing from some of them later. And also an external mentor. So pulling in expertise from people that run networks specifically in those areas, again, to bring in that good practice, but also to then share and collaborate as we move forward. And again, that's a really important part, that the people that are involved in networks or employee networks have the support in place. Our marketing department are also working hand in hand, producing the resources that the networks need. And moving forward, there will be an integral part in how marketing evolves as well in terms of this work. The aspect about the voice that they have, you can create new channels on how that voice is heard, or you can feed it into an existing channel. Now, we have already set up, and this is a couple of years ago, which is the Equality Strategic Review Group. It's been there probably for longer in various forms and guises. But we have the Equality Strategic Review Group, which then makes decisions about work around equality, diversity, inclusion within the group. And then that feeds into the executive team, the senior teams, and the board. So that mechanism already exists. So what we've chosen to do is to feed in the network voice into that strategic group. And therefore, any recommendations that come forward are reviewed properly. And then they are emboldened and they are strengthened by the work of the strategic review group, which then feeds it through as part of its recommendations to the senior teams. And I think that's an important aspect, is do not reinvent a wheel that already exists, is to use the existing structure of decision making when you're putting new voices into that decision making process. And I'm quite fortunate that I'm in a position where I'm surrounded by people who want that too. And that's not just the network chairs, but that's also our strategic leadership team. And I suppose how that was demonstrated was the email that I sent. I need an executive sponsor for each one of the groups. And I had 3 calls and I had 5 emails within the space of 10 minutes. All saying, absolutely, tell me how I do that. And from that point onwards, they are now developing their own relationship with the network chairs. And for me, that was really, really important that I had that level of support, because it can be a power for good. And I'm surrounded by people who see the same thing. And that's quite a unique position to be in. Before I hand you over to 2 of my colleagues and then back to the live session, I just want to really showcase to you the power of working together, and working together in a meaningful, honest and authentic way. And for me, in my career, I can honestly say I'm in that position. at the moment where I can actually see what happens when minds come together and are unified by a core vision. And that doesn't mean it's perfect. By no means, it is not perfect. And that includes me, in terms of we're all on that learning journey. But I think the willingness to learn and the willingness to change, the willingness to have conversations, the willingness to listen, for me, has been the key. It's not necessarily that we're doing everything and solving every problem. It's the fact that there is that genuine desire to do so. And in the 11 months, and I just want to point out 11 months that I've been within the college group, you can see on the list here the things that we have worked on, the things that we are working on, and the things that we're committing to. And this isn't about me. This isn't about one person driving this work. This is about a collective process that has led to people saying that these things are important and I am willing to put my skin in the game on this. So putting the EDI strategy at the heart of our new strategy was a bold move. I don't think it's unique, but I think knowing what's going on behind the scenes is fairly unique in terms of understanding what that actually means to us in a meaningful way and how we drive that forward. Placing EDI on the risk register, again, that's an ongoing conversation, but the things that we've already put in place, things like having a link EDI point at board level, so a non-executive link for me, absolutely key. The network's launching. FE Voices, this whole series here where we're really making ourselves vulnerable as an organisation, we're putting ourselves out there, we're making ourselves accountable, but we're also sharing good practice. That's something that was a strategic decision to do, because we felt that it was important to put ourselves out there because it means that much to us. The guide, again, all part of the same aspects, and the other aspect was to do with the reporting on our interim report. The things that we're still working on, so how do we integrate this in terms of the voice that we have internally and externally, so our marketing strategy, how do we thread this work through that? And again, there is work that's already happening on that aspect. Our commitment to an annual report that's going to be published, our community and sector activism, and that's ongoing. That will always be a work in progress. There is always more to do. There's always more to get involved in. There's always situations that arise that we need to have a view on. Embedding it within our leadership and development programs. Again, that's something that is an ongoing discussion. How is it threaded throughout our everyday training, but also what explicit training do we need at the different levels within the organisation? And we're just in the process of looking at that within our senior teams in terms of what that will look like. And then establishing where do we need evidence and where do we need that data? And we've identified some touch points and we have good data for that, but there are some areas where we don't have data in a reportable sense. And how do we get to that point where we do? Because again, it adds another lens on the situation that we're in and how we move forward. And so this is just a taste of what's been happening over the last 11 months in my world and at Milton Keynes College Group. I'm now going to hand you over to my colleagues, Jason Mansell, who's a Director of Operations, and Alex Warner, who is one of our principals, who's going to talk about what this work means to them.
So when considering EDI and why it matters to me, I want to take you on a bit of a personal journey. And specifically, it was only really when I started working in education and my early years in teaching that I actually started to realise and came to appreciate some of the personal advantages that I'd had through my life that had helped me to get to where I was. Having worked with cross-section of society and a really diverse community, I wasn't aware until such point of the advantages that I had faced all throughout my upbringing and gotten me to where I was today. So thinking about where I am now then, it's making sure that I have awareness not only of the personal advantages that I've been in receipt of, but thinking about some of the societal advantages as well. And making sure that I now play an active role in not only recognising personal, but also societal aspects that will be able to impact on an individual's advantages and making sure that all aspects of diversity and inclusion are taken into account when supporting the development of self and others.
After 50 years, I've recognised differences in myself, and I've developed the confidence to talk about these. For example, later in adulthood, I developed OCD, which some may see as a problem, but it's that OCD that makes me really good at my job. Having shared this with the people that I work with, it helps them understand how I work, which then makes a stronger sort of team working relationship. For me, it's vital that we recognise and embrace the differences in others and not see these as potential problems, but something that adds to the richness of our organisation.
What does belonging mean to you as a strategic leader?
I really value the opportunities that I've been given to grow and develop over the past 23 years working at the college. Starting as a tutor in a prison and now a member of the group leadership team. And it's this that's created a real sense of belonging for me at the college. For me, it's important that all feel valued for the contribution that they make, and that we as leaders recognise this and work with our teams to support all to grow and develop in line with their aspirations, to generate a sense of shared belonging. And if we can do this and we can develop that sense of shared belonging across the team, then I believe that we will have succeeded.
When we talk about belonging, I also think about making sure that you know that you matter, but specifically that you know that you matter. So I have sort of sense of belonging and making sure that you matter is kind of a real purpose within an organisation. So as a strategic leader, for me, it's not only knowing that I belong and that I matter, but actually everyone within the organisation knows that they belong and they matter too. So for example, acknowledging cognitive diversity among people and teams, and making sure that people know that they are heard, and making sure that they know that they are being heard within the organisation as well. We want to make sure that we reflect the community we serve, and the best way of doing that is making sure that we listen to all the views, the opinions of everyone to contribute to that sense of belonging, or making sure individuals know they matter. So in terms of barriers that I feel that we've already overcome, first and foremost is recognising that we have a problem. I'm going to talk specifically about the Institute of Technology and the technology sector and the social injustices that exist with regards to representation, whether that is Black, Asian, minority ethnic groups, gender, diversity, or those with learning or ability adaptations. So in terms of recognising, we as an Institute of Technology have had to shine a torch on this, but then it's about how do we build an institute that makes sure that it reflects the community that we serve. The technology sector, for example, has around about 80% male and 20% female. With regards to Black, Asian, minority ethnic groups, it's somewhere between 15 and 18% as well. So we shone a torch on that, and we've made sure that all of our targets with regards to student recruitment are focused on reflecting our community, so that we have that gender balance, so that we reflect the community with regards to Black, Asian, minority ethnic representation. But to achieve that, and in order to make sure that we're attracting the students, it's also making sure that as we build the institution, our workforce reflects as well. So actually making sure that we have that gender balance in terms of the team who are developing and delivering the Institute of Technology. So that's just a small example. But if I was to talk about my current role and across the Milton Keynes College group, it's how do we take that learning and amplify that across all aspects of provision? So for example, engineering suffers from similar injustices with regards to gender representation in the workforce. So it's about making sure that we carry that message across all subjects, but actually that we support organisations with the kind of what I describe as like the downstream. So those people who are going into the workplace, and making sure that there's roles available for individuals, not only that first role, but sustainable and ongoing employment and progression opportunities for individuals as well.
I think the tone from the top is vital, but importantly, this needs to be genuine. It's about senior leaders modelling behaviours and challenging inappropriateness. We're currently on a journey as a leadership team, and we had our first meeting of our new strategic leadership team today with many new members joining us. As we grow as a group, it will be important to ensure consistency of message to all staff whether they be based on campus, in a prison, in the IoT, etc. Whilst there's still work for us to do to all learn from each other, there's certainly a clear commitment, both in terms of our strategic objectives, the establishment of the employee networks, and indeed this discussion that we're having today.
With regards to representation and specifically leadership, I think it's incumbent upon all leaders to make sure that they reflect the community that they serve. So by way of example, if you are, for example, selling products, making sure that the the individuals that you're selling to, that diverse community that are purchasing is reflected all the way through the organisation as a whole. So with regards to Milton Keynes College Group, making sure that as a leadership team, we reflect the community that we serve. I think it's really important that we acknowledge that at present we don't. I think it's an honest appraisal of where we are at the moment. We recognise it and we're trying to do something about it. It starts with educating ourselves and educating others. If we think about the diverse community that Milton Keynes as an area represents, we need to do more to create access and opportunity. And I'm confident that we are doing the right things, but recognise there is always more that we can be doing.
Surely we need to be looking inwards as well in terms of what we're doing. So if you're asked to be part of something internally, as a strategic leader, do you think you're going to apply the same assertiveness internally?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And thank you for pointing it out. I absolutely need to hold myself to account, whether internal or external. So I'll raise the same question, whether it's for an external audience, similarly, whether I'm contributing to something that we're doing within the group as well.
So I volunteered to be an executive sponsor of the Disability Network, and I'm working with Victoria Curtis, the chair of this employee network, to take this forwards. Why did I volunteer? Well, for me as a leader, it's important to demonstrate active commitment to our new strategic plan and lead our vision and purpose to create fairer futures for all. I think for me, this is the one thing that I'll be doing over the coming year, which will have the most impact, both across the college, but also importantly, for my own learning and development.
My personal piece of advice would just be about learning. As learning organisations, we know about the importance of kind of personal progress and making sure that we continue to learn, unlearn, and at times relearn as well. So not recognising or not accepting that we are going to make an assessment and be able to overcome it immediately, but the ongoing process that we all need to commit to making sure that, again, we have that representation, that we know that every individual belongs and that we know that we always matter, and making sure that we test ourselves and others on that ongoing process.
Welcome back. That should have given you just an insight. I know that was longer than I'd envisaged that to be, but I think there wasn't much that I felt that I could miss out on that. But I want to jump straight in and just introduce Julie, Liz and Lee to the virtual stage. Do you want to start off, Julie? Is there anything that's come up in that or in the chat that you feel that you want to jump through? I know that Ian Revel from MK Community Foundation had some points at the beginning of the chat. I don't know if you saw those.
Yeah, I think Ian raised the really simple question of how do we encourage everybody to be actively engaged, and how do we take people who aren't engaged with us, and how do we tackle that? And I think that's just reminded me that the whole issue of inclusion and belonging is about people and how we accept individuals as unique people that can bring their own strengths. I don't think there's a simple answer, and there's been quite a lot of chat about it and about what culture is and how we develop that, as we heard in the presentations and from your presentation. It's all about those behaviours and that behaviour congruence, that the organisation and individuals in it act in a way which matches what we say about values. So for me, it's kind of triggered. Actually, I think our debate about values and what they mean for us would be a really good one to revisit as an organisation, because language changes over times and people's understanding of the words change over times. And I think that's something I'm going to take forward. So I'll be talking to colleagues about how do we make sure we use our values as part of our everyday work.
Thank you, Julie. Can I come over to you, Liz, if that's okay?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. And I don't know where to start because there's so much going on in the chat that I've been thinking about. I think it's really important that at the board level, we really focus in on the EDI. I don't want even to call it an agenda. It's too important to call it an agenda. It's much more than that. We need to talk more about the issues when we're in those board meetings. And I was struck by something I heard the other day about needing to shift our mindset from avoiding discomfort because we don't know the language or we're afraid of saying the wrong thing, to actually accepting that it is going to be uncomfortable, and that we have to go with that and accept it, get over ourselves basically, and so that we can focus on the things that really matter. But the other thing that I was really conscious of, and this is something I heard the other day, it's about, if you've got a leaky pipeline, don't blame the water. So we've not got good representation, or the representation that we need, but it isn't about the people. It's about the structures that are preventing them from getting there. And I know we talked about the challenge of getting more diversity into a governing body. And you explained one thing which I'd never appreciated really until you said it, which was that the people who have the time and who have the power to manage their own time generally tend to be in quite senior positions, whereas the people that we want to try to recruit into the board levels are maybe not in those senior positions, and then don't have that control over their time. So it's how we manage that, and how we can maybe engage with employers to free people's time up a little bit more, so that we can make those changes. So lots of thoughts spinning through my mind, but I'll stop there.
Thank you. Lee, can I come across to you?
Yeah, I mean, just to agree with Julie and Liz in terms of loads of really interesting points. I think one of the key things for me, and you spoke about it in the video, was the use of data. As a marketing kind of comms person, when we look at external audiences, we look at data all the time to understand how an advert's performing against something else. We do lots of market research to understand what customers are thinking. When it comes to internal comms and culture and what we look to create, sometimes we move away from that data-led approach, and we just talk about how things are perceived and all that kind of stuff. And actually, I think by using things like PCOM, which gives us that fortnightly snapshot in terms of how people are feeling, how different parts of the organisation is responding at different times of the year, how our internal communications and messages are being received. I think that data, which is backed up by the employee networks that give you that more, the word I can never ever say, despite the fact I need to say it quite often, qualitative data. Okay, that's the closest I've got, I think, to support some of those themes. I think that properly creates that two-way communication stream that otherwise is really tricky in an organisation with 800, 900 people that's dispersed as widely as Durham and the Isle of Wight. So, yeah.
Thank you, Lee. The work that we're doing, in essence, can seem quite daunting, and quite a lot of organisations that want to do the work and start the journey are overwhelmed by where do we start and what do we do. Now, I'm lucky that I've got 3 strategic leaders in front of me now that are involved in this work. What bit of advice would you give in terms of how to start that journey if you want to start that journey but haven't yet? Start with you again, Julie, if that's okay.
Oh, that's a great question, Arv. And I mean, there's a couple of things really which I think strike me as being always important, because a number of colleagues will have been on this journey and trying to make progress in the world of inclusion and belonging for some time. And I would say probably my top tip, which Lee will no doubt roll his eyes at, is don't be afraid to be a broken record. Just because a new way of working or behaving has been established, don't be complacent and think that's it. Your work is done. Keep on. Always be the person to ask the questions, to bring inclusion to the top of the agenda.
Thank you, Julie. Liz.
Actually, Ian just beat me to it in the chat.
You can't use that. You can't use that then. You can't use them.
Oh,
Yes,
come on. I was going to say start with the data, but what I was going to say was don't try and eat the whole cake at once. So go for the data, look at the data, find your biggest gaps. So where are the most problematic areas for you, and start with those. So bite off what you can chew, and you'll have to possibly triangulate that data against qualitative stuff, as Lee was saying. But I think things like, you know, the records of incidents of complaints that you might have, for example, or if you're talking about student experience, are you seeing that there are more academic misconduct claims in certain communities? Or, you know, there's a whole load of data sources that you can use. So that would be my advice, actually, to start with the data, but not to try and do the whole thing at once. Just start to fix the things that you can, and the other things will follow, because they're all interconnected, they're all intersectional.
Absolutely. Thank you, Liz. I think it kind of just piggybacking onto that, Karen Coombs she's mentioned something about unconscious bias, but I think just pulling that thread wherever that thread is does, and as Karen said, it's really started a conversation that wouldn't have happened unless you'd started that journey. So I think you're absolutely right. Start where you can, and don't try to do everything. Definitely sort of like lessens the emotive side of trying to take on this work. Lee, over to you, if I can. Same question, but I mean, for those of you that are not part of MK College and don't know myself or Lee, but myself and Lee, we work quite closely together in terms of communications internally and externally are crucial when you're talking about getting an honest and an authentic message across, and also gathering and capturing that feedback from the people that you're trying to engage with. From your point of view, what advice would you give somebody that's in a similar role in another organisation that is trying to start this work?
Yeah, I think if you can find yourself an Arv, I think that's really helpful. That you can't have ours. Yeah, I think I'd say, you know, one of the benefits of working in an FE college is that you're surrounded by people who are passionate about reducing inequalities anyway. So I think that passion exists, and I think unfortunately part of the reason I think colleges tend to be a focus for people with those passions is because if you work in an FE college, you see those inequalities every day, and you know, you can't help but be moved by it. One of the things, and it links into the point with Karen on unconscious bias, I think, is to take that responsibility for trying to educate yourself and to improve your awareness. So like Karen, I did some unconscious bias training, and to be honest, it absolutely scared the life out of me, because I thought, as a marketing and comms person, and I would imagine it's the same as a teacher who's in front of a class of 30, you are amplifying all of those unconscious biases. So, you know, we produce a website that has 20,000 people go onto it every month. If we copy and apply those unconscious bias to that website content, or, you know, our social media presence or whatever, we're amplifying that to more and more people. And so actually making sure that what we do is inclusive, I think is so important, because of that amplification of what we do. So any biases that we have, we amplify that out to all of the people who follow us on social media, to all of the people who engage with us in the various activities that we do. So yeah, I think from my perspective, trying to harness that passion that comes naturally from people all around you, and backing that up with engaging in training and taking that personal responsibility for yourself as well, I think.
Thank you, Lee. So first of all, I'd just like to thank you, Julie, Liz and Lee, for being on the panel today, and to Jason and Alex for contributing towards the video. And as always, these sessions could go on for hours if you really wanted them to. It's a topic that you really could delve deeper and deeper into. And as I said in the first series, the sessions are not standalone in terms of this is it, this is the conversation. We're envisaging these to be springboards to further conversations that either you have within your organisations, or you have with us, or for us to have internally as well, for you to share any experiences that you have being part of these sessions. So these really should be a springboard for those conversations that you have. So if you're looking for that thread to pull, this could be a thread that you could use to inject into your organisation. Say, watch this session and let's have a conversation about what we can do and where we can start. Please do share them far and wide. But the most important thing is for us to collaborate. Not one person can get this work done by themselves. It's going to take a collective, and that's not just one institution doing it internally. It's institutions coming together and organisations that surround them coming together to do this work. So from that point of view, I want to thank you. And but I'm not going to say goodbye. I'm going to say see you soon, because I hope to see the majority of you at some point, virtually or in person again. Next week's session is with Sam Coles from Birmingham Metropolitan College, who'll be taking a different view on this work. So thank you very much. Stay safe and see you soon.
Thanks, Arv. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.